A man walks into his boss's office at work one day. To his surprise, his boss informs him that he is making him a boss as well, for them to work side by side. They would each have their own independent duties and responsibilities. The man, thrilled, gets to work right away, instituting decisions that his former boss didn't even have the power to make. A few days later, the boss calls the man back, informing him that he is demoting him to his previous position because of some budget cuts. But a few weeks later, the man appeals to the boss's superiors, winning his position back. To the others of the office, one can imagine the extreme confusion this would create. Who is in power? How are they to treat a man whose power seems to constantly change? And interestingly enough, the people of this very country have faced a similar situation in regards to their government. Even in a short span of history, from President Reagan, who curbed the influence of the national government, to the aftermath of 9/11, in which national security standards were imposed upon the people, we have often switched sides between state and national government rights. But this is more than just a governmental seesaw. It's an aspect of the government that has existed since the beginning of the republic itself: federalism. For when the founding fathers made the Constitution, they ended up concocting a system that had no historical precedent in the entire world. The founders' decisions make it apparent that their primary concern was the protection of liberty. They believed in philosopher John Locke, who said that our natural rights had to be protected through the consent of the governed. And as a result, the founding fathers forged a compromise between the centralized, potentially tyrannical government of Britain and the divided confederal government of anarchy to create a federal system, one in which state and national powers were shared, with neither being supreme over the other. And a crucial part of this compromise was the 10th Amendment, which stated that powers not delegated to the national government, but not denied for the states, were the reserved rights of the states or the people themselves. And although many argue that the amendment is merely a truism, it has served as the basis for governmental change for over 200 years. The 10th Amendment has essentially directed interpretations of federalism, changing the way our society in itself functions. For instance, at the beginning of this country's history, the Supreme Court tended to consistently rule cases in favor of a broad and powerful national government. And this makes sense. A country beginning to grow needs a strong, centralized source of power to direct its development. But later, states began to demand their own rights in areas like segregation and interstate commerce through Plessy versus Ferguson or Munn versus Illinois. But when the Great Depression hit, the national government had to redirect its country towards prosperity, enacting federally funded legislation and federal programs. But when the states began to say that the federal government was being coercive, they began to point to the reserved rights of the 10th Amendment, and processes of devolution occurred once more. Even in our current economic crisis, we constantly switch sides between state and national government rights. But for that matter, even the founding fathers themselves left from the convention with different definitions of federalism. Hamilton believed that the state government was supreme, while Madison, that national had infinite rights. The fact that the Constitution has left its interpretation open for posterity emphasizes Locke's consent of the governed. Through the 10th Amendment, people and state governments throughout our history have been able to demand their own rights in self-government during times in which national intervention may in fact have been harmful. Thus, it's not the government that defines itself. It's the people, the ways of the people, the circumstances of the times ultimately determine how society will function. And the fact that the Constitution doesn't designate a be-all, end-all form of government isn't to be criticized. It's to be celebrated. For through the 10th Amendment and the Constitution itself, we, the people, have gained the rights that we as humans have always been meant to have. Thank you.